May 2, 2011, Abbottabad, Pakistan. Two stealth Blackhawks cross into Pakistani airspace carrying the most important assault team in American history. Their target, a compound where Osama bin Laden is believed to be hiding. One of those helicopters crashes in the courtyard. Tail rotor clips a wall. The mission should be over. It's not. The pilots of the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment don't panic. The assault continues. 20 minutes later, bin Laden is dead and every American is extracted, including the crew of the downed bird. That's the Night Stalkers, the unit that exists because of a catastrophic failure, built to ensure that failure never happens again. This is their story. Born from disaster, April 24, 1980, Operation Eagle Claw. 53 American hostages have been held in Tehran for 173 days. The rescue plan calls for 8 helicopters to fly into Iran, refuel at a remote desert site called Desert 1, then assault the embassy compound. It falls apart before they even reach Tehran. 3 helicopters go down with mechanical failures in the desert. The mission is scrubbed. During the chaotic withdrawal, a helicopter collides with a C-130 tanker aircraft. 8 Americans die in the fireball. The hostages stay in Tehran. The mission is a disaster broadcast to the entire world. Here's what went wrong beyond the obvious. The helicopters were flown by conventional Marine and Navy pilots. Good pilots. But they weren't trained for this specific kind of mission, long-range infiltration in degraded conditions, operating with special operations forces, making split-second decisions when everything goes sideways. They never even trained with each other. America didn't have a dedicated special operations aviation capability. Eagle Claw proved they needed one. October 1981, Task Force 160 activates at Fort Campbell, Kentucky. The mandate was simple. Never again. Build an aviation unit that can get special operators anywhere on Earth, in any conditions, and bring them home. They got their chance to prove it 3 years later, and then again, and again, for 40 years straight. What makes them different? The 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, officially part of Army Special Operations Command, unofficially the most skilled helicopter pilots on the planet. Their motto, Night Stalkers don't quit. That's not marketing, that's a standard. So, what makes them different from conventional Army aviation? First, they own the night. Night Stalker pilots fly with night vision goggles as their primary vision. Not occasionally, constantly. They train to operate in conditions where conventional pilots wouldn't even take off. Zero illumination, degraded weather, terrain that requires flying feet off the ground to avoid radar detection. Second, the aircraft. The 160th flies 3 primary platforms. The MH-6 Little Bird, small, fast, can land on a rooftop or in an alley. The MH-60 Black Hawk looks like a regular Black Hawk but packed with classified modifications for navigation, communication, and survivability. And the MH-47 Chinook, heavy lift, long range, can insert a full assault element with vehicles deep in hostile territory. Every aircraft is customized specifically for special operations, terrain-following radar, infrared suppression, weapon systems, communication suites that let them talk to everyone from the assault team on the ground to National Command Authority. Third, the culture. Every Night Stalker is a volunteer. They come from conventional Army aviation already qualified, and then they go through a selection and training pipeline that washes out most candidates. The Green Platoon assessment phase tests everything: flying skills, stress response, decision-making, physical fitness, psychological resilience. If you make it through, you spend months in qualification training learning to do things with a helicopter that seem impossible. Then you spend the rest of your career training with SEAL Team 6, Delta, Rangers, Green Berets, every special operations unit that might need a ride into hell. All that training, all that technology, it means nothing until it gets tested. Mogadishu was the test. Black Hawk down October 3, 1993. Mogadishu, Somalia. Task Force Ranger, Delta operators, Rangers, and 160th Night Stalkers launches a daylight raid into the city to capture lieutenants of warlord Mohammed Farah Aidid. The initial assault goes fine. The targets are captured. Then, all kinds of hell starts breaking loose. An RPG hits Super 6-1, an MH-60 piloted by Chief Warrant Officer Cliff Wolcott. The helicopter goes down in the city. The Night Stalkers don't leave. Other 160th Birds immediately moved to the crash site, inserting rescue teams under heavy fire. The ground convoy trying to reach the crash gets ambushed, lost, ambushed again. Then Super 6-4 goes down. Another RPG. Pilot Michael Durant survives the crash but is surrounded by hostile militia. Two Delta snipers, Randy Shugard and Gary Gordon, request insertion at the second crash site. They know it's a one-way trip. The Night Stalker pilot, Michael Goffina, inserts them anyway. Shugart and Gordon are killed defending Durant, who is captured. Both snipers receive the Medal of Honor posthumously. The battle rages for 15 hours. Night Stalker pilots fly continuous support, medevac runs, resupply, fire support, taking hits, and returning to the fight. 18 Americans die, 73 wounded. But the Night Stalkers flew throughout the entire battle, and they kept flying until every American, living and dead, was extracted. CW-3 Wolcott's crew chief, Staff Sergeant Bill Cleveland, was killed in the crash. Staff Sergeant Thomas Field, the other crew chief on Super 6-4, was killed defending the crash site. Night Stalkers don't quit. Mogadishu proved it wasn't just a motto. Mogadishu was the worst day in 160th history. It wasn't the last hard day, not even close. The War on Terror. After 9/11, the Night Stalkers went to war and didn't stop for 20 years. Afghanistan, first in. Night Stalkers inserted the initial special operations teams that linked up with Northern Alliance fighters and started dismantling the Taliban. The terrain was brutal. High altitude. Thin air that robs helicopters of lift. Mountain peaks that create unpredictable winds. The Night Stalkers learned to fly in conditions that would ground most aviation units. Operation Anaconda, March 2002. Night Stalkers inserted SEAL and Army reconnaissance teams into the Shah-e-Khat Valley. When the battle exploded, they flew continuous support, medevac, resupply, insertion, extraction, in terrain that gave every advantage to the enemy. Roberts Ridge. A SEAL fell from an MH-47 during an insertion and was stranded on a mountaintop surrounded by Al-Qaeda fighters. The Night Stalkers went back, multiple times, taking fire the entire time. Neil Roberts, the fallen SEAL, was killed. So were 6 other Americans in the rescue attempts, but the Night Stalkers kept flying until everyone was recovered. Iraq was different terrain, same intensity, urban environments, hostile air defense systems. The Night Stalkers adapted, flying profiles that conventional aviation couldn't attempt, inserting assault teams onto rooftops, into compounds, onto moving targets. Every major JSOC operation in the War on Terror had Night Stalkers attached. The Zarqawi raid, hundreds of capture-kill missions. The cumulative effect was the systematic dismantling of terrorist networks across 2 countries. Then came the mission that put them in the history books permanently. Neptune Spear, May 2, 2011. The CIA has located a compound in Abbottabad, Pakistan. Intelligence suggests Osama bin Laden, the most wanted man on Earth, is living there. The mission plan. 2 stealth-modified MH-60 Blackhawks insert a SEAL Team 6 assault element directly into the compound. A standard MH-47 Chinook waits nearby as backup. The Night Stalker pilots are flying blind in one sense. Pakistani air defense is active, and they can't know for certain they won't be detected. But they've trained for exactly this scenario for 30 years. The helicopters cross into Pakistan. Low altitude. Terrain masking. The Pakistanis don't see them coming. At the compound, one of the Blackhawks loses lift in the confined space, a phenomenon called vortex ring state, made worse by the compound's walls trapping the rotor wash. The helicopter settles hard, tail rotor clips a wall, and the bird goes down. This is the moment that defines the Night Stalkers. No panic. The crew chief calls out the situation. The pilots manage the crash so the aircraft settles without rolling. Everyone walks away. The assault continues. The second helicopter adjusts its insertion point. The backup Chinook moves up. The SEALs clear the compound, find bin Laden, and execute the mission. 38 minutes on the ground, the most significant special operation since World War II. On the way out, the downed helicopter is destroyed in place to protect its classified modifications. Every American, and one body, is extracted. The Night Stalker pilots on that mission. They flew into a nuclear-armed country without permission, lost an aircraft on the objective, adapted on the fly, and brought everyone home. Night Stalkers don't quit. The Standard. The 160th has been operational for over 40 years. Every Tier 1 mission in that time, Delta, DevGru, anything JSOC touches, has Night Stalkers attached. They don't go without the 160th saying, "We can make that flight." Think about that. The most elite direct action units on Earth don't launch until their pilots are green. The training never stops. Night Stalkers fly more hours in worse conditions than any conventional aviation unit. They rehearse with special operations teams constantly. When a new mission profile emerges, they develop the tactics to support it. The cost is real. Night Stalkers have died in every conflict since the unit stood up. Training accidents, combat losses, crashes in conditions that push the limits of what helicopters can do. The memorial at Fort Campbell lists them all: pilots, crew chiefs, maintenance personnel who kept the aircraft flying. The unit remembers, but they keep flying. The 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment exists because of a failure in the Iranian desert in 1980. Everything since then, Mogadishu, Afghanistan, Iraq, Abbottabad, and hundreds of missions you'll never hear about, has been the answer to that failure. Night Stalkers, "Don't quit," isn't a slogan. It's a 40-year track record. They're still flying, still training, still ready to put operators on target anywhere on Earth and bring them home. When the call comes, they answer. That's the standard.